they're a massive force and they're necessary and required. We can't run businesses without them. So their needs, their wants, their preferences are what are going to drive things.
Again, where you can give a simple boarding path for someone to come into that relationship, teach that millennial advisor, allow the client to help educate the firm as to what's important and continuing to be important.
There's a lot that goes into it, but they're not going to see on a spreadsheet, or they're not going to understand when they get their numbers.
Welcome to the Total Succession Show. I'm your host, Tyson Ray, joined by Kim Cochenour. We're glad you're here. Today's conversation just might be the nudge you need to start preparing for what's next.
Welcome back to the Total Succession Show. Today's guest is someone whose name you might already be familiar with, especially if you've run in the Raymond James circles. We're very excited and honored to have Dave Patchen with us today. With over 38 years of experience in the financial services industry, Dave brings a rare depth and insight that spans about every seat in the business. For the last 12 years, he led the Raymond James Education and Practice Management for the Private Client Group, supporting more than 15,000 financial advisors and team members around the globe.
Gosh, that sounds like a lot. And at the same time, he is personable. You can get to know him one-on-one, and he has a lot of great insights, which is why I asked him to come and share his thoughts on the concept of advisors, retirement, succession, and how people are trying to make decisions that affect their teams, their clients' lives. And so, Dave, thanks for coming on.
My pleasure. I don't know that my own mom could have done a better job with that intro. So
We got
very
a good
grateful.
team here.
Absolutely. Thank you.
You're very welcome. So as you kind of talk through with all that experience and running your own firm to supporting thousands of others, you've seen a lot of what works and doesn't work. And so we're going to start with kind of the crux of internal succession. It's kind of a real pressure point for us right now in the industry, kind of what's being done well. And when it does, it's a great thing. And then when it goes sideways, it can just derail tons of hard work. So where have you kind of seen the internal transitions done right?
Well, when they're done with an open mind and when they're done with a long range framework, like any other relationship, it's rare that you get it right the first time.
Mm.
And that happens, but it's the exception rather than rule. So kind of rule number one is, while you don't want to fail, you have to plan to fail to some degree, because to think with all of the hundreds of millions of people out there that you're going to get it right and pick the right person the first time. Be patient. It is a process. And in a way, expect to fail. There should be a prenup mindset of sorts, especially if you reach the point where some people want to bring an equity partner in right away, because unlike someone like Tyson's, who's built up a great enterprise that is driven by his leadership from a growth standpoint from the ground up, sometimes an advisor or team will bring another substantive wealth manager on board and give them equity. And those are cases where you definitely want to have separation agreements in place, in writing. The plan to fail mindset just makes sense. It's very rare that we engage with someone, no pun intended to use that terminology, and that we're with that person the rest of our lives. It's just not normal. So always approach an engagement in a future relationship with that mindset, just to protect both parties.
It's wise.
I had this firsthand, and I think your comments reflect it's kind of an industry problem. And it was a gentleman he had brought on the junior advisor. The junior advisor had worked for years. And then when they finally went in to talk about the succession and terms, it was both the junior advisor didn't want to take on that much debt. The bank didn't want to finance it necessarily without the senior advisor backing it on. Where have you seen missteps that internal succession kind of starts falling short, or they start using valuations that is a third-party sale in an internal transaction that also create conflict?
Yeah, well, it's because it didn't get started early enough. This is the chicken and the egg, folks. When do you start? What is the appropriate top line in EBITDA numbers that you start to look at that it makes sense for a junior partner to buy in? This is the tough thing. You guys mentioned my background. I've been in sales and have taught sales for 40 years now, and I can be a little snarky about it when I say, "What's the answer to every question?" It depends. That's the answer to every question, okay? The answer to every question is case specific. It's the same way here with Tyson's framing of that last question. The high macros are earlier is better when you know you have the right person. I think that because what happens at that point is the entry point is more nominal than substantive. Even if they're baby stepping their way in, it's happening. And from a commitment standpoint and a stickiness standpoint, that's really what's most important. But it's that the reason I'm throwing that out there for everyone is that's not happening most of the time.
Mm.
And I'm talking about within the first 2 or 3 or 4 years. Um, that needs to start to happen. What happens in most cases from my experience is the business owner talks about it and dangles the carrot on the stick, whether that's from time to time or during annual review meetings. And that plants a seed in the associate's mind and creates an expectation in the associate's mind that if something isn't acted upon and any other opportunity presents itself, there's vulnerability.
That was my first partnership that I was privileged to be an apprentice in. But every year it was kind of around the turn of the year, I got to find out if I was going to get a bigger split or if I was going to find out I was going to get paid more. And when we finally got into he was going to retire and I was taking it over, the conflict had become because he had worked he had been I had been partnered with him for 5 years, and in the first year, we doubled the production, and then, it became this battle over, what was I making versus what was he making, but in the end, after 5 years of doing this, the conflict was how much I was having to buy my own growth, but his mind was, "Well, I gave you the opportunity," and because we could have handled it better had we defined it in year 2 or 3. So when you got to year 5 or 6, all of a sudden, we knew what the terms were instead of having this wonderful relationship making this difference, but all of a sudden having this conflict. Because at 72, he wanted to be done, but he thought he wanted a valuation that didn't reflect what reality was for the 5 years that he was semi-retired before I actually stepped in. So, yeah, I lived that back in my 20s, and I think it's just like you said, the advice he kinda dangled it out there, and it was never quite defined.
Yeah, and even when you define it to their now you're in his shoes, right, Tyson, and you want the definition to be loose enough and flexible enough that if things change look at what's happened here, folks, in the last 10, 15 years. Because of private equity moving into our space, the multiples on the most operationally efficient, scalable, high margin wealth management firms has gone through the roof. And if you happen to own or run one of those, I mean, the worst case scenario right now is to be in an employee channel where you've built a real enterprise and a real machine that is just as I described, highly scalable, efficient, high client satisfaction, really efficient offering delivery, very high profit margins, and you're gonna get 2 times top line revenue when you go to retire. That versus you spitting out of there in some form or fashion, and I'm certainly not here to pitch all I'm here to pitch is how I would handle it for maximum valuation to take care of my family and my legacy, and it wouldn't be there, it would be to make a change, to have more flexibility around options as it relates to me moving out of the business.
And does the private equity and the multiples, make it harder for that next generation to step in and have that internal succession if that's the transaction that they're competing against?
It does. It does because the owner is back to a catch-22 or chicken and egg. The owner says, well, uh, and remember, the key variable here is there has to be um, some relation to top line revenue and true margin, true, EBITDA or profit before owner's compensation. Those have to be somewhat correlated because then the multiples don't make sense. Meaning, if you have a very noisy, very staff heavy, $10 million wealth management firm that isn't really that profitable, or is it profitable at 20%? That's not the same as one. Average margins in our industry is high 30s. So, um, if you're below that, the multiples aren't gonna make sense or aren't gonna be as high, but especially when you're running a well-oiled, enterprise, because of what's happened in the last 10, 15 years, it is much more expensive for next gen advisors to obtain equity in firms. It just is. Even this is a case that I dealt with recently where the owner wanted the person to become a partner and wanted to give them sweat equity partnership, and they didn't realize this is a pretty large firm. So we're talking a seven-figure transaction. Well, that's a taxable event.
Yeah.
So this young person now is excited, but they're not excited about the tax bill that they're going to have to to take care of. So, all considerations, yeah.
Yep, and then you have the horror stories that are out there where that happened, they paid the taxes, they got the equity, then down the road didn't were displeased, left, and the advisor had to buy their shares back. I've seen that happen. So, I'm listening to this, and I'm listening to the conflict, and I this just came to me, is why I love doing these podcasts, because collectively, we're gonna flush some of this out, and it's like we've always said in the industry, in the you got quality, you got cost, and you got service, you get 2 of the 3. Right? The more something costs, the more likely there's quality, more like, if it's low cost, you're probably sacrificing one of the others. And I feel like on the transaction side, it's multiple, it's the client best interest, or it's keeping your team, but you can't get all 3. If you're going for the highest multiple, something's going to sacrifice, whether it's, this, you built this whole team, and when these private equity things come in, some of those people aren't needed because that's the scalable aspect of operations and trading and some of these other things. And as I've talked to some advisors are looking at this, they want to keep their team in place. Well, you can't keep your whole team in place if you have ops people and people doing trading and some of these other things, because that private equity, they may try and hire some of those employees and maybe find new homes for them. But generally speaking, that's where they're creating these efficiencies to try and even pay for these multiples. And or the clients get affected based on the service or whether that they're getting, because at some point down the road, uh, there may be more one to many than one to one, if that's what your clients are used to. Uh, what are your thoughts about the advisor that's sitting there and needs to? I think there's a mindset that they have to realize you can't get these high multiples and keep everything the same.
Well, I think other than the naive or delusional ones, I think they already know that. I think the question is, what at what price and what's their driver? We all know this is an interesting thing about the advisor community as a whole. There is a chunk that are driven principally by the money, and that's not the ones I'm associated with, thankfully, past or present in my professional engagements, but they're out there. And I don't think you're going to convince them, because that's their driver, Tyson, of them trying to monetize the firm at the highest valuation, that there's any concessions accordingly. But you going back to your framework, it's the old something has to give and something does have to give. The thing is, though, I would tell you from my experience, because, and I'm going to be nice to all of you wealth managers out there, because I like you all, but some of you aren't that good at what you do. And in those cases, a bigger firm coming in and taking over, there could be some enhancements. Now, from a service standpoint, there's no question when the big dollar firms buy these practices, these businesses, that they are looking for efficiencies. So service can be compromised, but there could be, I can tell you from my experience, both being responsible for wealth managers as well as coaching wealth managers and working closely with the teams that approved wealth managers for discretion in the FINRA channels, that some of what's out there in discretionary portfolio management uh, might be better served with an institutional framework around it. And Tyson knows exactly what I'm talking about there. So we're going to keep anchoring on my definition of the answer to every question throughout the podcast. It depends, but certainly I think you can make some regular, consistent, educated guesses around the fact that generally there's going to be some compromise when a super high multiple is put in place. Something is going to have to change because they've got to make their money back.
Yeah. Well, and Dave, you were talking a little bit earlier, and I kind of want to dig in a little bit to this next generation because I think there's a huge variation between the generation that's retiring or going to be retiring in the next 10 years and this next generation coming up. The generation that's close to retirement, they were literally, and Tyson and Luke here at Forum can attest to this, were basically locked in a room, their car keys taken away, and said, "You're making 100 phone calls before you get out of here." And that's not the generation that we're bringing into the industry now. And so we kind of have a little bit of that mind shift difference in this next generation coming into ownership, partnership. And so I'd love to hear your take on, kind of why are we dealing with some of those issues, or what is it we can do to help advisors understand you're not bringing in yourself into this next ownership seat. You have to pay attention to those cultural dynamics so that it can be successful.
Yeah, it's great points. What's interesting, I'll say a couple of things. Having trained over 1,500 new to the industry advisors over the last 11, 12 years, my team did. There are exceptions to that. There are people like us, Tyson, and mine was 300 calls a day. I mean, I had a humidifier in my cubicle at Dean Witter 38 years ago because I would lose my voice. I never got off the phone. That's not true. I took a little break for lunch. I would go down to the gym. There was a gym in our building. I'd come out back up at 7 o'clock. I'd eat tuna fish out of a can and I'd get back on the phone. So I have been there, done that. Now, what's interesting is that doesn't matter to the next generation. And the reason is, and this really happened in force during COVID. I never thought part of it's egocentric of I'm a baby boomer, and we were such a huge market that we never thought millennials would have leverage against us. I mean, look at my body language and my facial expressions. It's like it could never happen, except it has happened, and it's happened in force because they are, and just combine a couple of these generations, they're a massive force and they're necessary and required. We can't run businesses without them. So their needs, their wants, their preferences are what are going to drive things. So really, who needs to give, in my opinion, some of you people my era don't want to hear this, but once again, we're hearing Dave's perspective. It's not right or wrong, it's my perspective. And that is, we have to be more flexible than they do. Meaning, if we're going to tell them, by the way, I want to hear Tyson's feedback on how well, if he's tried this, how well it's gone. If you're going to tell them, come in here, you're going to pound nonstop, you're not going to get much of anything promised or given to you, you're not going to have any quality of life for the foreseeable future, they're going to find another option, okay? Because somebody else is going to tell them something that's at least a little more palatable, and you're going to be looking for a new associate. So finding this happy medium, and or finding the people out there that are willing to do what I just described, and they're willing to do it for a sustainable period of time, because they're out there, they're just few and far between. That's the job.
Yeah, I'm mindful, and you would probably remember the name, Bob Dunwoody, but Bob Dunwoody used to say, "Go rent a 5-year-old because a 5-year-old knows what they want if you know, and they'll just keep asking till they get it, you know, "Can I go to McDonald's? Can I go to McDonald's?" And you'll eventually, as an adult, just finally take them to McDonald's.
Yes.
And what I would change to that is say, "Go rent a millennial," which I didn't appreciate till Kim helped bring on this college intern program, and all of a sudden you brought him in, and I thought, you know, it's gonna take him months just to learn how to use the technology. It's like, couple days, boom. I mean, they grew up with these things in their hands, and the fact that they took all this stuff on, the energy that they have. But yes, the days of cold calling and hard sales, what we found is a lot of the millennials actually want culture. They want mentorship. They want to be taught how to have these relationships that they haven't had learned how to have over social media and texting devices, all of a sudden communicating verbally. They have the skills, they just need to be strengthened and guided. And they want some, ironically, some security and some peace of mind. We found there's a lot more of them out there that would rather have a salary and some certainty than hear your composite zero, go dial for dollars and see what you can have. And with some of those, yeah, they got all kinds of energy, and they're able to respond faster than I am on some of this technology and respond to emails and texts and so on and so forth. Um, but the mistake I keep hearing from my peers or the founders that wanna turn this over is, "No, I gotta turn it over to the rainmaker. I gotta turn it over to someone that's gonna go, gonna go help build this for me." And it's like, there's a difference, I think, that in this, and I want your feedback on this to bounce it back to you, of, uh, at some point, there's both running the company and maintaining what is there that are job roles than thinking you just need to hire someone to go get new clients and build it from scratch like we did. Like, you keep thinking you gotta replace yourself with yourself, and I'm realizing, no, you actually replace yourself with compliments, because running the business and maintaining the clients that are already here is first priority before we start trying to grow it.
Yeah, so, you guys afterwards can go back and do a rewind, and the listener can do is just stop here and do a rewind. Everything Tyson just described about the wants of this generation, this newer generation, Tyson, we would like to have the same things. We would have loved to have every single thing you mentioned. We just if we even tried to ask, we got shot down, and we didn't see anyone else getting it, so we moved on. Okay, so let's not this is where I've done really well with millennials over this past 11, 12 years in training them, in that I learned a boatload from them, and I respect them. They look at some of the things they like that are important to me, like taking care of ourselves, taking care of the environment, eating good, healthy, real food. I love that they're pushing us in some really good, positive directions. Now, to your point about eh, the business does need to continue to grow, and but what I believe, and I have deep convictions about this. So if I offend anyone, apologize in advance. Okay. Um, I'm not a big believer in the whole social media thing. I'm just not. Because when I ask 99% of you, it probably is 100, how do you grow your business? The first word is the R word, referrals. And then next is, are they on purpose or by accident? And the vast majority of you say by accident. And so what I say is, to the extent you develop what I call process-driven referrals, and there's several different ways that you can do that. When you put process in place for referrals, the enterprise itself will generate the referrals, and the enterprise is beyond any one rainmaker. Even you, Tyson, if you're the catalyst for someone coming in to consider a relationship with your firm, it sure certainly doesn't end there. So where we can build, um, a client referral system, a center of influence referral system that is 100% process driven, and also a client feedback mechanism that is process driven, because all of the research data for the past 40 years represents that the highest likelihood and biggest driver of client referrals is ongoing requests for feedback from them. So if that's built in, this becomes less of a albatross for the next generation than most people think, especially with the well-established enterprises like yours.
Well, I do wanna say, as an elder millennial, thank you. I appreciate the acknowledgement
We
of
got three
the
generations
contribution we
covered.
bring to this world, instead of us all being lumps and just wanting everything given to us, so thank you, gentlemen, I really do appreciate that. I'll slap the word
It's
elder
true.
on there because
It's
that's true.
true. It's
It
true.
is, and
You
it's
know,
and it's been really fun, honestly, helping bring in the Gen Z part of that too, because we, like Tyson mentioned, we've got a phenomenal lineup of advisors who work in our office, who've graduated college in the last few years, who have their CFP under their belt. They're phenomenal with communicating with clients. They want to be a part of something big, but they don't have to own the whole thing, and they're not killing each other to do it, but they're doing that well with balance and just care. And so they've done a great job of being a good team member. But as our founding partners are getting closer to retirement and the other firms that are out there, these teams are thinking about succession. And there's a huge transition in preparing your team for that. Now, if you keep it all internal, there's less concern. But how do you help prepare teams for that kind of succession conversation without making them afraid? Oh my gosh, I'm losing my job.
well, yeah. You start by asking them what's most important to you about working with our firm. What's most important to you about your work? By the way, and it's so funny who I'm looking at and Tyson Ray to say this to. And Kim's going to know exactly what I'm talking about. The millennial surveys about what's most important to them about work. What do you think it is? What's the survey say? Vast majority say is what's most important to them about their careers. What is it? Kim?
Tyson, you want to guess, Tyson?
My
Well,
guess
I
would be
want Kim to
purpose,
guess.
but Kim guess.
Most important to me about my work. I would probably say a sense of purpose or a work-life balance.
It's making an impact
Hmm.
and you both said it the same way. And I know Tyson lives his life that way. Kim, probably you do too, because if you didn't, you wouldn't feel comfortable with him going on missions and doing all the things that he does. You'd think he needs to be in the office more. So, but my point I was going to make there is if that's most important to that generation, that's most important. What's interesting is I think I'll speak for baby boomers. We did not figure that out initially. We were money driven initially when we had we were Maslow's hierarchy. Okay.
Hmm.
We valued or perceived the need for affluence at the base. And once you're not very benevolent when you can't eat. Okay. So, uh, hey, and that's the downside of the old comp structures, right? I mean, they weren't really in anyone's best interest. They weren't. So making an impact, you start with that question. By the way, it's one of my favorite questions. Here's a nugget for especially some of you that are Tyson's peers that are listening in that think your process, your discovery process is the best. Here's one that we learned in the new advisor training work that I'm going to give to all of you experienced incumbent advisors now that is just a huge nugget, and you're going to be blown away by its simplicity. During initial discovery meetings, make sure you add the following question because none of you are asking it. Because I know this, because trainees would tell us, they would literally call us gleeful, saying, I asked that, and they said, you know what? I've had an advisor for 35 years. They've never asked me that question. And here's the question. What's most important to you in consideration of working with a wealth management or wealth management firm or wealth or financial advisor like me? What's most important to you in consideration of working with someone like me? You guys aren't asking that on initial meetings. Most of you are pitching on initial meetings. You think you aren't, but you are, because clients told us time and time again as they moved accounts to new advisors, wow, I get a chance to start over by telling them from the beginning what I want in working with someone like you.
Mhm.
I'll stop my preaching.
Love it.
We brought you on for your soapbox, Dave. That's fine.
Absolutely, it's here. My feet are on it. Get to know what's important to them. There are no wrong answers. By the way, it's like the old GE9 blocker. You know, you had some people that don't want promotions. They don't want to grow. They want to be put in a tight box where they come in and do the same thing every day. That's their wheelhouse. It's the same thing with things that you think are important to all of your associates. They aren't. And it's okay to have different carrots for different people. I'd be open in the communication of that so that everybody's on the same page and fully informed. But asking those questions is going to help make sure that what you're focusing on for that associate's development, interests, passions, growth is aligned with where they are, where they want to go.
Yeah, and one of the things that's counterintuitive, along those lines, if you're listening to this and you're the senior advisor, the founder, the owner, whatever your title is you want to use, and you're bringing on this junior person, rather than trying to teach that junior person all the ways that you already do everything that the client's expecting, one of the ways is to ask the clients that are your best friends, you've known them for life, "Hey, I'm asking the millennial that I just hired to come on and interview and get to know your story and about you," and that millennial advisor can start that conversation with this new person by asking that question, "What's most important to you of why you're staying a
Amen.
client of this firm?"
Bingo.
And it all of a sudden, you can reprocess or reboard your existing clients through someone new, and and the experience becomes the teacher instead of the advisor having to teach the old way of doing things when maybe there's some new information that the old advisor's not asking because they have familiarity bias, and so they've stopped learning about the relationship or how things have changed or what's most important. And that's again where you can give a simple boarding path for someone to come into that relationship, teach that millennial advisor, allow the client to help educate the firm as to what's important and continuing to be important.
It's gonna get the client more closely engaged and connected to the firm too, because they're
Mhm.
being asked. And the asking thing as the leader, as managers within within your respective firms is really, really important. So it's when you're onboarding an associate, as they become familiar, as they start using systems and processes, ask for their feedback on them. What do you think of this? What do you think is best and like most about this? What do you think we might consider changing? Not that we're going to change, but in an ideal world, how might you tweak this to make it better? And last thing on this, as a leader, because I built a truly world class team over time by asking these questions. Uh, a couple of things happen. Number one, when my door is open as the manager leader and they know they can come in anytime, but they also know they're going to be asked a lot of questions, they come in less frequently and they come in more prepared. Okay. So it's an efficiency measure for you and for the associate. They're not coming in just to, talk about the weather. It's going to be a meaningful engagement every time that they come in. And if they wanna do something a different way, I would let them do it with the agreement that we were gonna check in and see how it's going based on their way. And sometimes their way works better than your way, and sometimes it doesn't. Anytime their way worked better, I was out there giving them high fives. Anytime they were wrong, I was not out there saying, "Nah, told you, told you." You don't do it that way. You go out to them, you look back at what you guys tweaked, and you look back at what you agreed upon as the measurement of the tweak or the tracking of the tweak, and you both collectively agree that we need retweaking, or that kudos, your way, your suggestion actually enhanced the outcome.
Well, and Dave, when we were kind of preparing to talk with you, one of the things that actually surprised me a little bit is that the right thing for most advisors is that they don't sell their practice, because there's so much conversation in our industry now about selling and why you should sell. I'd love for you to walk us through kind of your thought process behind that, because I have a feeling I'm not the only one who would be surprised by that comment.
Yeah, so I can make an almost absolute statement here, but it's mine. It's not anybody else's, so it's not right or wrong. It's mine. The only exception to the person that shouldn't sell is the person that truly has come up with the next chapter that is all consuming and attractive and impactful to them. It's just there's so few of you that have that set up.
Mhm.
Let me put it another way. This is conversations I've had with it's probably over 1,000 advisors about, should I sell? When should I sell? To whom should I sell? How should I sell? Um, I really dig in with what's next. And then I say, think about your clients. Did you have clients that were business people, executives, career people, and or professional service company owners? CPAs, lawyers, dentists, doctors that owned a practice. Did you have them as clients? Most of you would say yes. And I'd say, let's jog your memory now. What were some good outcomes when they left, and what were some bad outcomes? And you all know where I'm going here. You all have
Mhm.
seen clients that did cold turkey something, and it's a disaster. And by the way, what's the highest incidence of divorce in our country? It's females above age 65. It's Tyson or Dave comes home. I just went through this. I did not retire, but I left a 27-year corporate gig after really being in the workforce for 40 years as an employee. And literally, and my wife and I have been married 31 years, have an incredible relationship. She's has her totally own life. We have a life together. It's an incredible relationship. Very autonomous, but she literally was kind of laid down some ground rules. And I can't say it without laughing. It's just so funny that I was going to rain on her parade or something. And
Yeah.
so keep find a way to either gently go off or gently over a long period of time be a hobbyist with just a handful of relationships you really enjoy. Don't drive your next gen nuts, okay? Don't. You still will, but don't. Um, but don't also this gut feeling that you have. So sorry, I'm very tangential. We had a neuroscientist at the conference I attended in Chicago last week, and this is fact. This is science now. There's a brain in the gut, folks. There's a
Mm.
brain in the gut. So you think about the language our grandparents used about your gut as it related to making decisions.
Yeah,
There's
trust your gut.
science grounded in that. It's so fascinating. So when your gut's telling you, I I don't feel right walking completely away from this. And by the way, Tyson, back to the private equity things, a lot of cases they want you out, completely out within 2, 3, 5 years. Be scared of that, folks, because most of you don't need an extra couple $1,000,000. You don't with what you've built. You don't. You need to make an impact and to be a part of something much more than you need that extra couple of million, except when you truly have some other full thing to do that's going to be completely engaging for you.
Gosh, there's so much there. It's like you could almost do another podcast just on that section. I agree with the philosophy of retiring into something. And the total succession podcast wasn't, and the book isn't necessarily totally having to sell. It may be retiring from email. It may be retiring from compliance. It may be building a team so you can free yourself up or bring other people in, that you can retire from the things that you don't like into the life that you do. But we've seen it. If you've been in this business for any length of time, you have the experience of seeing the individual that retired, whether it was by their choice or not their choice, into nothing, which was often through a journey of depression that they maybe never got out of or never had that purpose or happiness. Their health started failing. They went through marital struggles, all these things you're talking about. And it's because, and this is also a Bob Dunwoody ism, it's okay, if your whole life is retirement is not working, then when you're not working, retirement is nothing. It needs to be defined before you make the actual exit going into retirement. Um, the other thing about taking the money or being incentivized to take the money, because I have firsthand an advisor that wanted to sell his practice. We bought it. He got what he wanted financially, and about 6 to 12 months later, he's told me several times, "I wish I wouldn't have done this because I'm now bored and I missed the job and I missed this, and I really didn't need the money. It was nice to have, but I could have." And and for myself, when I looked at the aggregators, I spent a good part of 2024 looking, do I want to roll up into any of these? And wow, the money and the dollars. And then I started figuring out, it's like, wait a second, I can go get a $50 million loan myself and take 70% of my business revenues at 7% for 10 years and pay the loan off. And it's like, because everybody forgets, no one's giving you their money when they're buying your business. They're taking your future revenues, discounting it a little bit to the present, and giving you it in a lump sum now, which is the income you would have earned and probably less than what you would have earned if you held it for 10 years, which is, I guess, the concept why you might want to be thinking about maybe you don't sell. However, in the part of succession, which is the focus of this book and the focus of this podcast and the focus of this conversation, you will exit your practice in death then. If you're gonna hold it forever, you're gonna exit. So there still needs to be a plan. The I'm
Of
not gonna
course.
sell is not the I just get to forget about this whole thing.
Right. I'm not gonna fully walk away is what we're really talking about, and you shouldn't fully walk away in most cases.
Well, and I appreciate the perspective that it's the acknowledgement that advisors are helping their clients walk through that, but they've neglected to realize that that might just be part of their own practice exit themselves. And so you have to have something that you're moving towards. And I think that's part of where Tyson kind of built out this space framework that I'll let him kind of explain so that advisors can start actually planning for that.
As we get wrapping this up, this is where, um, the first conversation I had with you about having you on, and just this conversation we're having now, we've covered these, right? So SPACE is a framework of, it's an acronym of seeing, which is to see where your practice is, see what the options are out there, see what you want to do in your life. Do you see yourself retiring? What are you going to do on the other side of that? Do you see your millennial or junior advisor? Are you lifting your head up and seeing what it is that you want? And then when you start seeing these things, your brain will help you then start deciding, your gut will help you start deciding, okay, now what do I got to do prepare to implement what I'm seeing, right? You got to see the picture before you can paint it. Then what do you have to act on? Then what do you need to commit to? Sale, don't sell. If you're hiring a junior advisor, you might need to commit to letting them grow into the role of the way they need to grow into it, or bring new experiences in, or all the things we talked about. And in the end, exiting, whether that's exiting in retirement, exiting in death, or just exiting from areas of the business that you're not good at, you don't like. And it's funny, I kind of came up with the steps and then backed into the space, and it's just like the space aspect of is a dimension of giving yourself time, stepping away to even be able to think and get off the rat race of your life to start thinking about what is this legacy and everything that you have. So as I lay that out, what resonates with you, Dave, about where advisors get hooked up, or what seems important in that concept of space?
Well, you actually had me going on a direction of Zen training and putting space around
Yes.
thoughts. And Dunwoody, actually, it's not trademarked to Dunwoody, so it will be in my book. My framework for um, the highest order of engagement inner internally is be, do, think. Um, and it's the opposite of what we do in Western society. And so I think to put a plan in place, you have to do a lot of thinking and a lot of doing. But to get it done right, you have to take time and find space. The most powerful practice is the ability to put space around your thoughts. And everybody that starts to dabble in this, what do you learn? You learn breath work. The way that I can summarize how to do this so efficiently and effectively is this is a this is the biggest macro of our conversation and a great one to start to wrap up on. You can't, as a human being, we cannot think and feel at the same time. So a sensory modality will interrupt thought. That's its design and purpose. That's why breath work is a meditation pathway, because you're focused on sensory modality, in this case, breathing, not on thought. Now, what happens? We all know what happens when we meditate. Monkey brain comes back in, comes back in, comes back in, comes back in. But for us to reach our highest depth as human beings, we need to have a dimension about ourselves on a regular and continual basis, absent thought, beyond thought. Okay. Prayer, obviously, is in our society the one that gets people the closest. But I think there's an element even beyond that, or that you wrap awareness around your prayer time that takes your depth as a human being, your disconnection from your egocentric self and mind to an exponentially different level. Sorry to go so deep on you guys, but
No, you
it's
don't have to apologize for that.
good, good, good. It's
Oh,
I don't mind sharing this. We lost a son who took his own life almost 6 years ago, and I thankfully, it was divine intervention that I was 10 years into this stuff. I could have never survived.
mm,
We could have never survived going through that without being able to at least compartmentalize it. Doesn't mean it goes away. It
yeah,
doesn't mean it's not a part of our lives every single day,
yeah,
but it does mean that it isn't who we are. It isn't what we are.
mhm.
It's something that happened. And being able to put space, coming full circle, Tyson, around that, between that, and then apply that to how intentional you can be to create a really great plan for yourself, your family, your legacy, your team, and your clients. You're going to have a better plan if you understand how to put space around your thoughts and take these mind breaks.
Well, Dave, thanks for sharing that perspective because I think um, it is an emotional transition for advisors when they're thinking about leaving something that they've built, that they're going to have to put some of those feelings and time into that just to help them process that because there's a lot that goes into it that they're not going to see on a spreadsheet or they're not going to understand when they get their numbers down. And so thank you for putting that emotional side to it because I think it's often very much overlooked in this
Yep.
huge transitionary space.
Yep. And as you're listening to this and you felt that gut check and you felt like, yeah, I need to do that. I want you to, the only way that works right now is to go decide a time block somewhere in the futures. Maybe it's a morning, maybe it's an evening, and go block off time to create the space to think, to do that. Otherwise, this impulse will pass you by, and down the road, something else maybe hits you. But nothing's going to change unless you make a commitment of time to make it happen. So do that for yourself.
So how do you start to define what do I do during that time? Just be, just be, just sit. Just and it's hard. And what happens? You start picking this up. No, no, no. How long can you be? And even then, if you're going to take action, this is the whole in millennial speak. It's how do you show up? And do you show up with this thing going, or do you show up to just be with another human being? And the reason I'm going to tell you, the reason we call it Zen Advisor. That's the mental framework we taught the next generation of wealth managers that my team delivered. And it was all about connection being the primary goal each and every time you meet with someone. That's not and it's not persuasion. The way toward helping someone is a curious mindset and an open mindset, not a persuasive, thought-driven. I mean, who wants that, by the way? I mean, we were all taught that, Tyson, but who the hell wants that?
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, and
clients,
clients
customers don't,
Yep,
investors, clients don't want it. We don't want it as consumers.
correct.
And by the way, which takes more energy? Look what I'm doing now. I'm pitching. I'm going to go on pitch. How much energy does this versus me sitting back and saying, Kim, how are you doing today? What's going on?
Mhm.
What's new?
Yeah.
What's
People are
happening?
seeking that real relationship, and I think technology has helped us become very efficient in what we can do, but we've lost some of that ability just to truly connect with people and be present with them. Take your phones off of the table. When you sit down to be and you actually start considering that, put your phones in the other room. Take off your Apple Watch. Let the people who know what you're trying to accomplish, what you're going to be unavailable, and see what you can do in that time space. It'll change your perspective on how you can think if you get rid of those distractions. So that's wise perspective.
Yes, it'll be a totally different experience.
Mhm.
Get the phone out of the room and be with another human being. It's a totally different experience.
Yes, it
And you
is.
nailed it,
It is.
Kim, that the research is very clear. If it's on the table, it's only a matter of time till the person reaches for it. It
Mhm.
has to not even be there. It's
Yeah.
amazing. Great,
Yeah.
great,
Yeah.
great stuff.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna do the hard job here and say we actually need to wrap this up, Dave. I'm pretty sure we could and probably will have you on. Love to get your perspective as we kind of keep digging into this and as things in this industry are ever evolving. We'd love to have you. Thank you for your clarity. Thank you for your perspective, and then challenging the listener to actually stop and make this a priority to start thinking through this and understanding that all the feelings that get tied into it are as important part of this process as looking at the actual numbers.
My
Yeah,
pleasure.
thanks for having me on. It's been great. Appreciate you.
Thanks. Enjoyed it and happy to help moving forward. So just keep in touch and good luck on the book and the podcast. And we'll see you soon.
Yeah. Till next time.
I've wrestled with these things myself, and that's exactly why I created something to help you do it with less stress and more direction. My book, Total Succession, simplifies the process by breaking it down into 5 clear steps to help you exit on your terms, with confidence, full compensation, and your client's best interests at heart. You can also head to totalsuccession.com for 1, a free guide that you can use as a starter to work through the see, prepare, act, commit, exit framework, and 2, for another freebie, my Advisor to Advisor Retirement Readiness Assessment. Remember, you only exit your business once. Create the space to make it happen. Thank you for listening. Until next time.